So today I called this Priorities and Finances. I don't know if you know this or not, but the scripture, especially Jesus as he speaks, one of his main themes throughout the New Testament, Paul doesn't deal with this quite as much, but he touches on it in many places as well. Peter, the same, is finances. And the proper understanding and looking at those and what all that is. So I called it Priorities and Finances. I don't know if that's good or not, but anyway, you get the idea, right? So we're going to look at this passage from Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 34, but we're going to look at it in pieces as we go, just so you know, okay? So I'm not going to try to read the whole thing. We're going to deal with it. I realize we're kind of long today. Bear with me. I'll try to get through this as quick as I possibly can. So let's look at Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 15 to begin with, okay? Then someone called from the crowd, "Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me." And Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" Then he said, "Beware. Guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." So that word greed is actually covetousness or coveting. You know, it sounds like a 10 commandment, one of the commands. Do not covet. It's the idea of that. Greed is more than just, wanting. It's having to have. It's seeing what somebody else has and saying, I have to have that, or, the Smiths and Jones. It's a yearning for more. It's always seeking and never satisfied. That's what greed is. So you got that idea, right? When we were in Crimea a long time ago, we were in Yalta. It's one of the resort areas. It's where the World War II peace accords were actually signed. It's about 2.5 hours from where we lived. And we were over there for some training. And I was taking a break, and I don't know what I was doing. I was going somewhere, and I was coming back. That I remember. And as I walked back, there was this quite new BMW they call it, BMW, sitting on the road. Now, that was a clear sign it belonged to the mafia, because nobody else in the whole country could even afford to look at a BMW unless they were mafia. So as I walked by this, and I'm looking at this car, and I'm going, am I in the right place? Because, things can get sketchy if you're not careful. I walked by, and out of this door walked this guy, and he was dressed like a king almost, clothing that I couldn't believe. And I thought, okay, now what? Well, this lady who happened to be right there, she knew him. Who knows how, I don't know what. And she says, "Hey, man, how you doing?" He goes, "Oh, okay." "What's the matter?" He says, "Oh, I don't have enough money." And then he says, "But in general, I never have enough money." I think that fits with many in our culture today. We never have enough. We always are wanting more. We are yearning, and that's what the greed is. We yearn. It's like an overpowering emotion and desire for more stuff. It got me thinking, I wonder if we, even as believers, if we can have greed, but not the behavior that goes with it. Now, I'm not saying I don't know. But our culture really plays into this, don't they? On the TV, which I don't watch hardly ever, doesn't matter, print media, electronic media, whatever, get this shampoo and you'll have the shiny stuff in your hair and you'll be gorgeous. New clothes, new car, new house, new appliances, new. Does that appeal to our covetousness, our greed? That's the whole idea of what advertising is about. You're not satisfied, and if you are satisfied, you're dumb, because I'll tell you, you're not satisfied. That's kind of how it goes, right? And then I got to thinking, do we justify it even sometimes? Going to a store, "Can I help you, sir?" "Oh, no, I'm not buying today. I'm just looking." I don't know. I'm not judging that. And by the way, I'm not even judging the idea of stuff. But when you have stuff, the problem with stuff is that you have to take more time to use it. Imagine this. You buy a brand new boat, and you sit it in the garage, and you never go out with it. Why do you have the boat? Well, the neighbor has one. I got to have what he or she has, right? You get the idea. If you have stuff, you got to do something with it. Otherwise, it just sits around. Now, I don't think necessarily stuff, and okay, you get the idea. When I'm saying stuff, I just mean things in general. Having stuff in and of itself, is that bad? I don't think so. I don't think it is. I don't think it's bad, but as a culture, our culture, and as a people, we have come to the point where stuff dictates our life. As a matter of fact, we've created a whole new industry. You know what it's called? The storage unit. You ever think about that? Used to be we just store it in the house. Not anymore. Go rent a storage unit, right? Put all my stuff in there. I'm sorry, I'm going to kind of pick on you, but not really. I'm not trying. Those of you who have storage units, when was the last time you were in it? He had to justify himself, didn't he? But the truth is, most people, I've encountered those folks, you have too, they're moving, they have storage units. I don't remember what's in here, just toss it. Stuff. What does it give us? What is it about? And I think Jesus, in verse 15, he's very clear on this. He says, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. Life is not measured by how much you own. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 22 through 26, Solomon says this, so what do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. It is all meaningless. Verse 24. So I decided there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work. And then I realized that these pleasures are from the hand of God. For who can eat or enjoy anything apart from him? God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those who please him. But if a sinner becomes wealthy, God takes the wealth away and gives it to those who please him. This too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. We often, the eating, drinking, finding satisfaction, I like to work. I really do. Physically, I enjoy it. Now, I get tired, and there are times when I'm done. But I like to work. I enjoy doing that. Is there anything wrong with all that? As a matter of fact, I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I think biblically we're called to work. We are to do work. Whether it's physical, okay, it could be blue collar or white collar stuff, but we are called to work. As a matter of fact, that's a part of who we are even as believers. Our service oftentimes will entail doing work. But I think what happens in our world, and you see this, a major frustration of many people is that we get more and more thinking that will bring satisfaction when it doesn't. They're not able to find the meaning they are seeking with stuff. It just doesn't happen. So just to give you a really bad example, I seem to inherit, what is that word? Inherit, there we go. Wrenches. You go into my shop, Carl's been there, a few others of you have been there, and you look up, and I probably have 150 wrenches. How many sizes are there? Crescent wrenches, I bet I have 12. I don't want them. If you want them, please let me know. I'll give them away. I inherit those. For some reason, it's like I'm a magnet or something. Oh, I got tools. You want some? Okay. I don't want them to go to waste. Somebody will use them sometime. But does it give us satisfaction? No. It's kind of cool to walk out there. Well, I have a crescent wrench like that. It's a big one. Well, that one I use, actually. Not very often, but I use it. Well, that's cool. Okay, but does it give satisfaction? No, it's a tool. That's the difference. Stuff that provides for something we do, for work, whatever, but not to just have it in general. And that's a trouble in our culture is oftentimes we're seeking meaning through stuff and it never gives it to us. However, those who have come to know Christ, I've noticed, it doesn't matter if they have stuff or not. Somebody steals it, or they take it, or they give it away. Matter of fact, I've seen that happen so many times. People say, hey, man, could I borrow that? No, you can just have it. Take it. I don't need it. I mean, I know where to come get it if I need it. I'll borrow it back. We find, as believers, there's peace and joy. The stuff doesn't add a satisfaction to life. As a matter of fact, it gets in the way. We're scrapping stuff. We've invested in metals for 65 years out there. Well, we're getting rid of it because we don't need it. Most of it's broken down anyway. In Philippians chapter 4, verses 10 through 14, after 30 years of following Jesus, Paul says this. I put that in there, that 30 years, because I think it's important. He says this, how I praise the Lord that you're concerned about me again. I know that you've always been concerned, but you didn't have the chance to help. Not that I was ever in need, for I have learned to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or an empty one, with plenty or little. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. And then in Hebrews 13, the writer says this, don't love money. Be satisfied with what you have. For God said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. Be content. Okay, maybe it's not the newest and the greatest. Does it work? Do you have debt? And if you don't, keep it. Do Dave Ramsey thing. And by the way, we're hoping to start a finance class in probably January, where we're going to deal with some of these kinds of issues. If you would like to be a part of that in whatever way, let me know. But we just think it's so important we have a handle on it, even as believers, our finances. Especially with inflation as it's going right now, and the price of things and the issues going on in life. There's ways around some of that, and some of it's decisions, but we can do it. Okay, so Jesus continues on. Remember the boy, he said, I want to share my father's inheritance. And Jesus says, avoid the greed. Your life doesn't consist of what you have. So then we're in verse 16, and he continues on. Jesus told him the story. He says, a rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. Then he said, I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. Then I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, patting his tummy, of course, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. In the Greek, in this passage, either the word I or my is mentioned over 18 times. This guy was an egoist. He was totally focused on who he was. It reminds me of that story in 1 Samuel 25. I'm not going to read it, but you know about David and Abigail, who became his wife, but she was married to a guy named Nabal. And Nabal was the most surly, egotistical, angry person. And he had everything. And he ended up dying of a stroke or a heart attack, we're not sure. But he ended up dying. And I think for us, it's important just to gain perspective on what is important in life. This guy named Kingsley, he wrote this thing. He says, if you want to be miserable, think much about yourself, about what you want, what you like, what respect people ought to pay to you, and what people think about you. Ooh. Somehow that hits. Another guy said, it's when we forget ourselves that we do things that are remembered. Because then we don't have to worry about the credit. Who's going to come after us? In James chapter 4, he says this, verse 13, look here, you who say today or tomorrow we're going to go to a certain town, we'll stay there for a year, we'll do business there, make a profit. How do you know what your life will be tomorrow? Your life is like a morning fog. It's here a little while, then it's gone. What we ought to say, Jesus says, is if the Lord wants us to, we will live and do this or that. Otherwise, we are boasting about our own pretentious plans, and all such boasting is evil. Now, in this example that Jesus used, we see this rich man, and he had everything. He wasn't wanting for anything, except for one thing. That's tomorrow. He hadn't planned that into his schedule, had he? He had not planned that into his schedule. I read an article, or read a illustration about a guy who kept praying that he would be given revelation as to what the stock market would do next year at this time. So he could go ahead, make his bets, because that's really what the stock market is you place your bets. Invest your money, you got it. And so then he would be able to reap a harvest when next year came around. Well, a newspaper from a year ahead ended up on his desk. So he started reading it, and man, he found the best stocks to invest in, started to do that, and then he followed through on the pages, and he just thought, well, I wonder who's died. And guess whose name was there? When we seek after that kind of stuff, we've lost it. If it's all about the money, folks. So Jesus continues on in verse 20. He says, but God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. It's good to remember our time here is short. And I haven't seen a time clock where we check in, and sure, there must be something in heaven, but there's no dictate as to when that might happen, is there? It could be tomorrow. Could be today. In Psalm 39:4, the psalmist wrote, Lord, remind me how brief my time on earth will be. Remind me that my days are numbered, how fleeting my life is. I've had the privilege, and call it that, of being with a lot of people who've passed from this life into the next. Some were Christians, some were not. But I noticed one thing. Never have I ever encountered anybody about to die who said, I wish I hadn't made that much money, or I wish I'd made more money. You know what they always wish for? More time with their families, with people they love. That puts it in perspective as to what really is important. We have our priorities mixed up sometimes. There was an American who went down to Mexico, and he just happened to be, he was on the Baja watching some guy, and the guy took his little skiff out, caught some fish, came back in, and the guy looked at him, the American, and he says, man, nice fish, but why do you have just a few? And he says, I caught enough to supply for my family's needs. He said, well, what do you do the rest of the time? He said, well, I play with my kids, I nap with my wife, and in the evening I go downtown and play the guitar with my friends. And the American said, man, you're missing it. I have an MBA. You know what you should be doing? Go out there and catch a lot of fish, take them in, sell them, and then go get more fish. Over time, you'll build up your business. You'll get new boats. You'll have hired workers. Probably you'll move out of this village or never go out on the water again. You'll do all those things, and then you can sell your business and you'll make millions. And the guy looked at him, he says, well, then what? He says, well, then you go to a small village and you retire and you play with your kids and you nap with your wife and you go play the guitar with your friends. I'll let you come to the conclusion on that, okay? This guy, the rich guy that Jesus told about, though, he made several mistakes. One is he believed the purpose of wealth is to buy the things of life. Remember DeSoto? He wanted to have the elixir of youth. What is that? The fountain of youth. Find that so he could have water that would keep him young forever. Somehow we get that idea. If I buy enough, have enough, I'll live a lot longer. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. Related to that is that we believe that if we accumulate enough things, that means we'll be happy. Does that happen? No. I buy something and then it breaks. I can't remember who I was talking with the other day, and they bought something. 2 weeks later, they had major problems with it. They got it fixed, and they had more major problems with it. Often that's the case. Does it mean happiness? No. A long time ago, actually, about 100 years ago, there was a whole bunch of really rich men who were assembled at this place in Chicago. the president of the largest steel mill in America, the greatest wheat speculator, a man who was the president of the New York Stock Exchange, a member of the president's cabinet, a top investor in Wall Street, a future director of the World Bank, and the head of the world's largest monopoly of that day. After a few years, we're talking 3 to 4 years after that gathering, Charles Schwab died in debt. Arthur Cutter died abroad in obscurity, broke. Richard Whitney did the same in Sing Sing prison. Albert Fall was pardoned from prison in order so he could die with his home. Jesse Livermore, Leon Fraser, Ivan Kruger, all committed suicide. All these men learned how to make money, but none of them learned how to live. Priorities. Third, this young man believed that if he had more possession, he could have enough possessions. It's like that, right? Well, just one more. Just one more. I got okay, it's like that rich guy. He's got his barns. He had a great harvest. By the way, I had a great harvest this year. I decided not to tear down my barns and build new ones. How's that? Just so you know, I decided not to do that. I'm going to let the land go fallow for a year. But we think if we have enough, just one more, and we'll be really happy. Everything will be hunky-dory, be perfect. And yet, Paul says, I've learned to be content in whatever my circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. Fourth, he was short-sighted regarding his future. We forget that our lives are like a fog. 2 or 3 generations out, who's going to remember where our grave is? Who? Jesus. He'll remember. He knows. But apart from him, who will remember? Very, very few. So Jesus continues on, and he's not done with this. You think that's enough, Lord. I don't need to hear any more. I got it. No, he keeps going. In verse 22, he says, then turning to his disciples, Jesus said, that is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life. Whether you have enough food to eat or enough clothes to wear, for life is more than food and your body more than clothing. Look at the ravens. Okay, that's like a crow. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, but God feeds them. And you are far more valuable to him than any birds. Can all your worries add to a single moment to your life? And if worry can't accomplish a little thing like that, what's the use of worrying over bigger things? Verse 27, look at the lilies and how they grow. They don't work to make their clothing, yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for flowers that are here today and tomorrow thrown into the fire, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? And then verse 29, and don't be concerned about what to eat and what to drink. Don't worry about such things. These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers all over the world, but your Father already knows your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else, and he will give you everything you need. And in verse 32, so don't be afraid, little flock. Interesting he uses those words. For it gives your Father great happiness to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions, give to those in need. This will store up treasure for you in heaven, and the purses of heaven never get old or develop holes. Your treasure will be safe, no thief can steal it, and no moth can destroy it. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. So what Jesus is doing is he's taking this passage and he's applying it to our everyday lives. And he's saying, don't worry. Do not worry. That worry, I don't know if you counted them. I didn't count them actually, how many worries are in that passage, but a lot. But you know what that word means in the Old English? It means to strangle. That's what worry means, to strangle. So, you could paraphrase it, worry strangles your life. Now think about that. It conveys the idea of troubledness, of being afflicted with mental or emotional distress. We worry, and it takes life out. Worry is destructive. Have you noticed that? You know what they say about what worry does to your heart? It physically will kill us. It's deceptive because it wants to replace what real life is all about. It tries to put in place of who God is something of tangible, we'll call it wealth, tangible substance. Whatever it is. There's a story of a guy who won a match, a wrestling match, and he got paid in $5,000 in gold. He put it on a belt around his waist. He was going back to England or to Europe on that boat, and this particular boat started to sink. He tried to jump off, and guess what happened? He sank immediately because he wouldn't let go of the wealth. Those worries, it's deceptive, as if that gives life. It also blinds us to the fact of who really cares for us and values us. As a matter of fact, and this may offend some, so forgive me, worry is really a self-declared lack of trust in the Lord, in God. We worry and say, well, God can't handle it, so I have to worry. You ever known anybody like that? Don't look in the mirror. I didn't mean to say that. We know people like that, don't we? They worry so stinking much. What kind of life is that? It's empty. It's very empty. When worry can't and won't accomplish anything, why worry? When was the last time, think about it, when was the last time your worrying actually had a positive result? It is. I agree. And that's why I said it's deceptive. So none of you have a good result from worrying? Then why worry? Why worry? It doesn't do any good. It does not help us at all. Yeah. Chuck Swindoll, in his book, Stress Fracture, said this. He said, whoever dubbed our times the aspirin age didn't miss it by very far. It's correct to assume that we've never seen more stress-ridden society than ours. For many, gone are the days of enjoying bubbling brooks along winding pathways or taking long strolls near the beach. The relaxed bike ride through the local park has been replaced with the roar of a motorcycle, whipping through busy traffic. The easy-come lifestyle of the farm has been preempted by a hectic urban life of families going in 6 different directions, existing on instant dinners, shouting matches, strained relationships, too little sleep, and too much television. Add financial setbacks, failures at school, unanswered letters, obesity, loneliness, a ringing phone, unplanned pregnancies, fear of cancer, misunderstanding, materialism, alcoholism, drugs, and an occasional death. Then subtract the support of the family unit, divide by dozens of opinions, multiplied by 365 days a year, and you have the makings of madness. That's our world. Worry seems to be so integrated that we miss out on what's going on. One of the guys who founded the Mayo Clinic asked a very wealthy patient one time, he says, what on earth are you going to do with all your money? He says, just worry about it, I guess. And he says, does it really give you that much pleasure to worry about it? He says, no, but I get such terror when I think of who is going to receive it. Worry. The mother said to her little son, Bobby, you ate all that cake without thinking about your sister. And he says, I was thinking of her the whole time. I was worried she'd come in before I got it finished. Jesus says, don't do those things. Don't worry. So how do we live that way? How do we actually move to that place? Well, first of all, I think we need a proper attitude. According to George Barna, the non-believer, no, by the way, I need to preface this. America is one of the most generous nations in the whole world. We give more per capita than anybody else in the world to all sorts of charitable things. Everybody. However, for non-believers, their average is 2%. You know what the average of what they get, actually they give back. You know what believers is? Any ideas? 2.5%. 2.5. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people who are very generous. There are. But we've lost the attitude of what this is about. Giving is not about how much you have. Rather, giving is about the attitude in which you give. I don't care what you give, to be honest, but do you give with a thankful heart, with a grateful heart? And I don't even care if you give it necessarily here. But do you give because God is saying give? With what attitude? Secondly, we need to focus on others. Now, in this particular section of Scripture, the younger brother is telling him, I want the inheritance. The rich young guy, or the rich farmer, was focused on himself. There was only one person who was not focused on himself. You know who that was? Jesus. He gave. He gave everything for us. And one of the keys to the faithful stewardship is the ability to focus on others. We see a need, you know what we do? I won't tell you all the details of this. I remember a situation, though, a number of years ago where this young family was trying to get into a house. They didn't have the money. I had somebody come to me and say, would you give them this as a gift? It was like $10,000 so that they can get into that house. Do not tell them where it came from. And so I passed it on. Immediately, they started weeping because they didn't expect it. Believers, people who love Jesus, who just want to bless and help other people, who are thinking about other people. In the book of Acts, in chapter 1, I believe, where you have 120 people, and the Holy Spirit comes, and over 3,000 people come to Christ in one day. Can you imagine that in here, by the way? We would go crazy. But you know what the key was to all of this? In chapter 2, all the believers were together and had everything in common. Selling their possessions and goods, they gave to anyone who had need. That perspective of focusing on other people. Albert Schweitzer said one time, I don't know what your destiny will be. One thing I do know, the ones among you who are really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. A friend of mine he's long passed, down in Doris, California. Joe Librand was his name. He was the most giving person I've ever been around. Ever. He didn't have anything. But what he had, he grew, his whole yard was a garden. Every morning, he would go out, collect the vegetables, and go to somebody's house in Doris who had a need. He knew everybody. And he'd leave it on the doorstep and walk away. You know what was fun about that? Everybody in town knew who did it, too. Everybody did. He was just the sweetest man. But you know what made him sweet? He knew Jesus. Jesus changes lives. Thirdly, we need to understand biblical ownership. Now, I know this is going to touch people. Do you ever think of yourself not as the owner, but as the manager? God has put you in place as his steward. That's another word for manager. It's not yours. Whatever you have is not yours. It belongs to the Lord. As a matter of fact, I would even go so far as to say this. God has given you the 100% to deal with, but you only deserve 10%. The 90% belongs to the Lord to do as he chooses. Now, I'm not telling you what to do, and I'm not saying we should give it all away, and I don't even think that's the intent. What the intent really is that our hearts are right. And we understand that this is not about us. It's about God. It's about Jesus, and it's about his ownership. In Psalm 24:1, it says this, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all its people belong to him." In another, and I think it's in Psalm 33 or Psalm 30, I can't remember, all the cattle in 1,000 hills belong to who? Okay, thank you. But who do they belong to? The Lord. They're not ours. I got 10 head, so I don't know how many that is, at least. Most of them, they're all God's. Priorities. Focusing on right. There was 3 men, a guy named Arnold, Harold, and another Harold, and they were in Death Valley, and their car broke down. It was very hot, and they were found later dead as they had walked trying to get out of Death Valley. They found their bodies 7 miles, 14 miles, and 17 miles from their abandoned car. There was nothing there around them. However, if they had gone 1 mile the other way, there was a spring and shade. Priorities. What works? What is it? And you know, in our world, oftentimes we're looking for the pleasures, we're looking for the stuff, and somehow think that that's going to satisfy. It does not. Years ago, especially for the older folks, I don't have to explain this, but for you younger people, there was a TV show about cowboys, and his name was Roy Rogers, and his wife was Dale Evans. They were in many very good movies. They were great citizens. They were believers and followers in Jesus Christ. Once when Dale was being interviewed, that's his wife, and she was asked, "Why are you so joyous all the time? Why is there that spark about you?" And this is what she said. "All my life I searched for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but I found what I really needed at the foot of the cross." The biggest mistake we make in life is not following after what really gives hope, what really gives meaning and purpose. One guy said, "If happiness truly consisted in physical ease and freedom from care, then the happiest individual in the world would not be a man or a woman. It would probably be the American cow." What worries do they have? Now, I have a steer, they need to worry. But cows, what do they need to worry about? Absolutely zero. Now, this sermon covers a lot of ground. Nowhere in there was I trying to shame anybody. I hope you get that. That was not my purpose at all. We all struggle with this in one way or another, where we try to figure out what is our priorities. Folks, we're all on a journey, and we're trying to do what Jesus wants us to be. But it's worth noting that sometimes we spend money on things that we want, which, okay, I get it. But then we keep thinking, well, I want more, and we're willing to pay more. So the question really is, how much is God worth to you? Are you willing to pay more? And I'm not even talking about money. Are you willing to be what he calls us